So today, in terms of the theme of the conference, parallel moves, the traditions in modernity and modernity in traditions, we're using the framework of a Javali called Marachitivo. For those of you that are familiar with it, it's a Telugu piece, and it will unfold as we present our work today. That's just a plug for my book. You can't get it here, not yet anyway, but you'll remember the picture, I hope. So we're thinking about using the Javali as a way of thinking through the various and hidden and intertwined histories of American modern dance and Indian dance, thinking about memory, history, and their connection to actual dance practices. It was in a dance classroom, a PhD seminar that I attended at the eve of the last millennium, when I was falling asleep. This will be a theme today, of falling asleep and forgetting. When suddenly I was shaken awake by the professor turning on a film clip where I suddenly saw a woman. Well, yes, there you go. I saw a woman, this woman in particular, in black and white, dancing and forming a perfect Hamsasya mudra. And I thought to myself, who is this woman and why is she able to form the Hamsasya so well? Because this was a film clip of the foremother of American modern dance, and her name is Ruth St. Denis, and it was a clip from 1941. And again I thought, this can't be right. How can this woman be forming the Hamsasya mudra? So I asked my professor at the time, how is she, who is she, and who are her Indian dance gurus? And they laughed, the professor laughed at me and said, no, there's no Indian dance gurus. This woman was a solo genius. She is the mother of American modern dance. Don't you have any idea? Get with the program. I had been trying to get with the program, but I couldn't. The modern dance that was being taught really felt alien to me, and I kept thinking to myself, well, what good are our dances if I can't convey what we do to them and we can't understand what they do? Where is the medium going to be? As I continued thinking about Ruth St. Denis, I was bowled over by the fact that actually this 1941 recording had come from a 1906 performance where she had actually performed a piece called Radha, Dance of the Senses. So this Radha, Dance of the Senses, was apparently, again, a solo genius invention by Ruth St. Denis, who everybody said was a fantastic Orientalist who got all her ideas from researching everything in the library. But I, being the unruly Indian spectator that I was, decided that couldn't have been possible. And as I looked further into her performances, I realized they were actually women that she'd encountered at a place called Coney Island in New York, previous year. These women were Nachwalis that had been brought from India to do a big show called the Darbar of Delhi. This Darbar had been a huge production, and there were, on the streets of Coney Island, which was made to look out like Taj Mahal, a palace of sorts, the Nachwalis came and performed there, and Ruth St. Denis went in the summer with her brother and her mother and basically took a lot of ideas from them. However, this taking of ideas from these Nachwalis became hidden in the history of American modern dance. Even though Ruth St. Denis performed on stage with Indian men on the 1906 show, and these Indian men were clerks and cooks and sailors who would happen to be in New York at the time, and she turned them into priests to make her Radha of the temple senses work for her. But what was intriguing to me is that the history of Ruth St. Denis, in all the biographies, the autobiography even, kept not accounting for these Nachwalis. And for example, if you read here a very prominent biography by a woman named Suzanne Shelton, it points to something very interesting, that the way that Ruth St. Denis's dance was characterized was by the spiral turns and whirls, the worlds in which she was dancing and spinning and doing her work. So this is what captivated my attention. Why is it that movement is recorded in Ruth St. Denis? And I thought to myself that it is in movement, really, that the Nachwali's trace remains. So I became even more intrigued, and as I looked further into the archives, what I began seeing was these movements that had imprinted themselves onto these dancers. See, even in her photo that she took, you'll see that she's wanting to create the idea of the spin, of the turn, of the skirt moving in time and space. And I thought, why is she interested in that movement in particular? And how did that movement come? Not from libraries and this poster, which was supposed to be one of her motivations, but from actual Nachwalis. And if you look here, it's quite interesting. I'll show you again. This is a Nachwali from Calcutta around the same period, and there she is. And this was the Darbar show in which the Nachwalis had performed as part of a larger parade involving elephants and camels and horses and a large pageantry. As I started looking into the archives, I realized that actually Indian women dancers had been coming to the US from as early as 1880. And in fact, they had been performing on US stages for a very long time. This is some of the evidence from the newspapers that are present. The first encounter that I've read so far is in 1880 and 1881, which is a really significant encounter where these three Nachwalis, Umda, Bhuri, and Sahab-Jan, had journeyed from Calcutta once again and had come to perform on a New York stage, Augustin Daly's theater production. And although initially these Nachwalis were received with great excitement, the moment that they actually performed, their performances were met with disgust and they were taken off the stage quite quickly. However, this did not prevent Indian dancers from becoming curiosities, and they went to perform in P.T. Barnum. This is actually the death of one of the dancers who died in 1881 in New York. They went on to perform in P.T. Barnum's circus shows and street shows, and even larger circus performances and street performances, including World's Fairs. And this is all ranging between 1880 and 1907. I'm just giving you an image of the kinds of women that were coming. They were not all Nachwalis. Some were actually Devadasis also. Some of them were from South India, and some of them were from Sri Lanka also. And I point to you this picture, which is a very interesting picture of Nachwalis Devadasis in 1907, being turned out, actually they were extradited for overstaying their welcome. They had overstayed their contract visas in the United States and were kicked out. And this was one of the images of them in the shipyards as they were leaving the US. But who remained with Ruth St. Denis for some time was the men that danced with her on stage. Now again, these men were dismissed, just as the Nachwalis had been dismissed, as they could not have actually created and been the impetus for Ruth St. Denis's work, because their performances were ugly, their dances were boring, the taste that had developed in American audiences was not met by the Nachwalis themselves. So the Indian men ended up performing with Ruth St. Denis for some time, and this particular man in particular was quite interesting. He ended up suing Ruth St. Denis in 1911 for taking his dances, which he said that he had created, and that she had stolen his ideas without giving him any credit for his choreography. But his court case was dismissed quite summarily, saying that how could a cook, he was employed as a cook, how could a cook know anything about dance? And that too, how dare he critique Ruth St. Denis, Madam Ruth. After all, poor Miss Ruth had brought these people together with her on stage and given them an opportunity on stage, and how ungrateful was he that he was trying to sue her. he actually tried to sue her for $1,400 US, which is quite interesting. Of course, he didn't get any of it, and he was also thrown out of the country soon afterwards. But this throwing out of the country is quite interesting because I'm suggesting that it's this throwing out of Indian bodies from the US that actually helped consolidate what we call today as American modern dance. So Ruth St. Denis ended up starting a huge school with her partner, Ted Shawn. That's not Ted Shawn, that's one of the other priests, by the way. Many of you would have seen Ted Shawn in his famous Nataraja image, which circulated for some time. So Ted Shawn and she set up a school called Denis Shawn, which you could say was a little bit like Kalakshetra, dare I say it, maybe not. But anyway, it trained many young dancers, young girls primarily, to dance Indian dances, which were called Oriental dance at the time. But then Ruth St. Denis also became influenced by other Asian forms, such as Javanese, Japanese, as well as some Spanish dances. So she started mixing things together. But essentially, what's important to remember is that what the motivation was that brought her and made her a star, because she had just been a skirt dancer until this point, was the Nachwalis and their actual physical interaction with them, which is what I'm saying left their traces in her body through the turns and the whirls that she was creating in years to come afterwards.
Come in and let's work on the piece we started yesterday. Marachiti wo o nasami, marachiti wo o nasami, marachiti wo o nasami. Marachiti wo, keep it light. Na sami, marachi. No wrinkling of the eyebrows, just slowly increase the emotion. Na sami, marachiti wo, o na sami. You've got to feel it so that I can feel it. There needs to be layers, there needs to be shades of emotion. Just a second. Marachiti wo o nasami, marachiti wo o nasami, marachiti wo o nasami. Ana tirati, 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 marachiti wo o nasami.